"Get out of my house," the Duke of Wilbraham said. He had not decided to say it. The words came out of him, the way a shot comes out of a gun that has been left loaded too long, and they came because he had walked in from the rain, dripping in his own front hall, and heard a piano. Nobody had played the West Music Room in 2 years and 4 months. He had locked the door himself the week they brought his sister home, and had put the key in the back of his desk, and had walked past that door perhaps 900 times since without once turning his head toward it. Now the door stood open, and there was firelight on the floorboards, and a small crooked scale was climbing the keys one note at a time, and a woman's voice was saying patiently, and again, "Master Tobias." The thumb tucks under. He was in the doorway before he knew he had crossed the hall. The governess turned. She was a thin, upright young woman in a brown wool gown with darned cuffs, and she had his sister's music open on the stand, and his nephew was on the piano bench with his stocking feet swinging clear of the floor. 6 weeks. She had been in the house 6 weeks, hired by his steward while he was in town, because a boy of 7 cannot be raised by footmen, and the Duke could not at that moment have said her Christian name. "That room is locked," he said. "It was, your grace." She stood very straight. "The key hangs on the housekeeper's ring." "You went into a locked room and put a—" He stopped. The boy had gone rigid on the bench, both hands flat on the keys, staring at the music as though he might vanish into it, and the sight of that stillness did something ugly in the Duke's chest that he mistook entirely for anger. "Get out of my house." She did not argue. She did not weep or plead her character, or ask him to consider the hour or the weather, or the fact that the nearest coaching inn was 4 miles down a moor road in the rain. She said, "Yes, your grace," and she closed the instrument gently so that the lid would not clap, and she lifted the boy down off the bench and set him on his feet and smoothed his hair once, very quickly, with the back of her hand. Then she curtsied and took the candle and went out past him, and the last thing the Duke saw was his nephew being led up the dark stairs with his small hand swallowed in hers. He sat in his study until 2 in the morning with a glass he did not finish. Twice he got as far as the bell pull. What he would have said if he had rung it, he did not know. The tune the boy had been picking out was a country air with a turn in the 3rd bar, and Cecily had played it badly and often, and had laughed at herself for it, and the Duke had once told her at this very desk that if she played that turn one more time, he would have the piano thrown in the lake. He had said it to make her laugh. She had laughed. 11 days later, a carriage had gone off the Marlbeck Road in the dark, and there had been no more laughing in Wilbraham Hall at all. He told himself the woman had overstepped. Servants did overstep. That was all it had been. The house was too quiet at breakfast. The boy was brought down at 9 by a housemaid instead of a governess, and he sat with his hands in his lap and ate nothing and looked at nobody. And when the Duke said, "Good morning, Tobias," the boy's eyes came up and searched his face for something and did not find it, and went down again. At 11 the Duke went up to the schoolroom floor. He would have said, if asked, that he went to inspect the boys' copybooks. The governess's room was the small one at the end of the passage, and the door stood open, and he stopped on the threshold and did not go in. It looked untouched. Not stripped, not emptied in haste, with the drawers hanging and a hairpin on the floor and the grate full of ash. Untouched, as though no living person had spent 6 weeks of her life in it. The bed was made up tight enough to bounce a coin on, the counterpane squared, the pillow smooth. The washstand was dry and set straight, the basin turned. The grate had been swept and a fresh fire laid ready in it, kindling, coal, paper, for whoever came next. The candle in the stick on the mantel was a whole new candle, not the stub she had been burning. She had put a full one there in place of what she had used, and he understood, standing in the doorway, that she had bought it out of her own wages so as not to leave a debt behind her. Beside the candlestick lay her wage envelope, with his own seal unbroken. And on the schoolroom table, squared to the edge, was a stack of paper written over in a small, clear, patient hand. He picked it up because his hand moved before his judgment did. For the person who comes after me, the first page said, and then. He will not eat eggs. Do not press him. He will eat bread and dripping and drink his milk warmed, and by the 3rd week he will eat with you if you do not watch him doing it. He cannot bear the corridor at the head of the stairs after dark. It is not naughtiness. Carry the candle low so his shadow does not go before him. He has spoken 17 words since the 2nd of October. They are written on the last sheet with the dates, in case they are of use to somebody. He is not backward. He can read better than he lets any of us see. He turns the pages of the atlas when he thinks himself alone. He wants his mother, and no one in this house will say her name to him, and so he has begun to believe he invented her. When he asks, and he will ask, do not change the subject. It costs a person nothing to say a name. He is very good and very tired, and he is waiting for somebody in this house to be glad of him. Please be glad of him where he can see it. The Duke of Wilbraham stood in an empty schoolroom on a wet Tuesday morning, with 16 pages in his hand, and got as far as the 4th before he had to set them down on the table and put his knuckles against his mouth. The last sheet had the 17 words on it. Yes, no, cold, thank you, rain, again. And in the middle of the list, dated the 11th of November, Uncle. He had not been told. Nobody had thought to tell him because he had never once asked. He went down to his study and unlocked the drawer where the steward left what was not urgent, and there they were, 6 letters, folded and directed to him in that same clear hand, one for each week she had been in the house. He had carried 2 of them to London in his coat and had never broken the seals. Reports from a governess. There had seemed no hurry. He read all 6 standing at the window in the gray light. They were not complaints. Not one of them asked for anything. They told him that his nephew had laughed on the 14th at a duck, that he slept better with the door ajar, that he had drawn a house with 6 windows and a woman at one of them, that he had asked whether his mother had liked music, and that his governess had answered, on her own authority and without permission, that she was certain of it. The last letter, dated 4 days ago, ended. The boy needs an hour of your Grace's company each week more than he needs anything a governess can give him. If your Grace can spare no hour, tell me so plainly, and it shall not be asked again. He rang the bell so hard the wire shook. Where has she gone? He said to Mrs. Furrers. Miss, and there, at last, he had to be told his own governess's name. Miss Pellow, your Grace, Verena Pellow. The housekeeper had her hands folded and her chin up, and had plainly been waiting 2 hours for this question. She walked out at 4 this morning for the crossroads. The night mail was full. She'll be waiting on the 6 o'clock tomorrow at the Fleece. Walked in that rain. She would not take the gig, your Grace. She said she had been told to get out of the house, and the gig was the house's. He ordered the horse saddled, and then did not go, because a duke does not gallop 4 miles down a moor road to apologize to a governess, and because he had no notion what he would say when he arrived, and because he had spent 2 years and 4 months making a discipline out of feeling nothing, and it did not surrender in an hour. He was still standing at the window at past 4 when the housemaid came in without knocking, white to the lips. Master Tobias, your Grace, he's not in the house. They searched it first, every room, the cellars, the stable lofts, the linen presses, the boy's own bed under it, behind the curtains in the long gallery where he liked to sit. It took 20 minutes and it felt like a year. The Duke came out onto the steps into a wet gray dusk with the mist already lying along the park wall, and the moor beyond it going the color of slate, and it was Mrs. Furze who said, in a voice she had never used to him before, "He'll have gone after her. He is 7 years old. He'll have gone after her, your grace, because she was the only thing in this house that was his." The Duke did not remember mounting. He remembered the drive, and the lodge gates, and the long climb of the moor road with his men strung out behind him and lanterns swinging, and the rain coming in level off the tops, and calling a name into that wind and hearing nothing come back. 4 miles. There were ditches on that road, and old workings, and the beck running brown and full under the pack bridge. And he thought about all of it in detail, every yard of the way, and something in him that he had thought was safely dead began to come apart. He came over the last rise and saw the crossroads, the milestone, the black finger post, and the lamp burning in the porch of the Fleece. And on the milestone, under a soaked gray cloak spread out like a tent, sat Veronapello with the boy inside her arms. The Duke got down. His legs did not entirely belong to him. "He came up the road at 4 o'clock, she said. She was hoarse and shaking with cold, and she did not stand, because the boy was asleep against her collarbone with his fist wound into her sleeve. He had walked the whole of it. He would not go into the inn, your grace, because he was waiting for the coach. He believes that all coaches come back the road they went. You have been out here in this since 4. He would not be moved, and he could not be carried alone." She looked up at him then, and there was no reproach in her face at all, which was infinitely worse than reproach. "He is not hurt. He is wet through, and he has cried himself out. He said 11 words. The Duke knelt down on the wet stones of the crossroads, in his own county, in front of his own men, and put his hand on his nephew's back. "Tobias," he said. The boy stirred and turned his head, and looked at him for a long moment out of Cecily's exact eyes. "You said get out," the boy said, "so I went out with her." The Duke of Wilbraham had been called cold by 3 counties and had never troubled to correct any of them. He said, "That was said to her, and it should never have been said at all, and it was not said to you. Not ever, not once." His voice did what it liked with him. "Your mother's name was Cecily, and she played that tune badly, and she laughed about it, and she would have laughed at you playing it too with you, not at you. And this is your house. It has been your house since the day you came into it." They took the boy into the Fleece, and got him dry and warm and asleep with the landlady's own blankets round him. Then the Duke stood in the low parlor with his hat in his hands, which was not a thing he had done since he was 19, and asked Veronapello to come back. "No, your grace," she said. The fire spat. She had a borrowed shawl round her shoulders, and her hair was coming down, and she said it as plainly as she had said yes to him the night before. "You will not come back. As your governess," she lifted her chin. "The boy has lost his mother, his father, and his home. He cannot also learn that a person who loves him can be sent down the road at 10 minutes' notice by a man in a temper. If ever a servant is turned out of that house again in front of him, it must not be someone he needs. So your grace may find him a governess he can spare." She stopped, and then, evenly, "Or your grace may keep the one he cannot, on terms that no temper can undo." He looked at her for a long time. "You are asking me to marry you," he said, "in a public parlor in a borrowed shawl." "No," said Veronapello, going scarlet. "Certainly not. Your grace may take that from a governess's mouth as impertinence and dismiss her a second time, and she will walk to Marlbeck in the morning as she intended, and she will not blame him for it." "Sit down," the Duke said, "please, before you fall over." He waited until she sat, and then he set his hat aside and drew a chair round and sat facing her, close enough that the firelight was on both their faces. 6 weeks you were in my house. You wrote me 16 pages so that a stranger would know how to be kind to him, and you paid for the candle you had burned, and you left my money on the mantel unopened, and you left the fire laid for the woman who would take your place. I stood in that room this morning, and there was nothing of you in it anywhere, and it was the emptiest thing I have ever seen in my life. It was not my room, she said quietly. One does not leave marks on other people's houses. You left one on mine. He turned his hands over. You are not being kept on terms, Miss Pellow. You are being asked. Not for his sake, though I will use his sake as an argument if it serves me, and I am not proud. For mine. I read 6 letters this morning with my own seal on them, and understood that somebody had been holding my family together for 6 weeks while I was busy being a monument. I do not intend to be a monument. I intend to be at that piano on Thursdays, badly. And I intend you to be there to hear how badly. And I have no earthly right to intend either of those things unless you say so. She looked down at her hands and up at him, and her eyes were very bright. Say her name to him every day, she said. That is my condition. Every day. Then yes, your grace. Ranulph, he said, you may practice it now. You have 4 miles in a warm gig to get used to it. They were married in the parish church at Wilbraham in the first week of spring, quietly, with the boy standing between them holding the ring in a folded handkerchief, and doing it perfectly. The county called it a strange match, and then, having seen the Duchess of Wilbraham once, called it a shrewd one. The West Music Room was never locked again. The Duke himself carried the key from his desk to the housekeeper's ring, and left it there in front of the whole assembled staff, which took 4 seconds and undid 2 years. He was, as he had promised, a bad pianist. He was at the instrument every Thursday nonetheless, with his wife beside him turning the pages and his sisters, boys shouting corrections at him. And the sound of that hour went along the corridors of a house that had been silent for a very long time. Years afterward, a visitor asked the housekeeper the truth of the old story, whether the Duke had really turned the Duchess out of doors the night they met. He did, Mrs. Furrers said, and by the next day her room looked as though she had never been in it. 16 pages she left for the next girl, and not a hairpin for herself. She nodded toward the study door. His Grace keeps those 16 pages locked in his desk, where the key to the music room used to be. He reads them every year on the day he said it. He says a man ought to remember exactly what he nearly threw away.